How we think about and voice the purpose of school matters. It affects what we put in or take out of the curriculum, and how we teach that curriculum. It affects the way we think about students, all students, about intelligence, achievement, human development, teaching and learning, opportunity and obligation, and all of this affects the way we think about each other and who we are as a nation. Perhaps it may seem odd to begin sharing my thoughts about why school, reclaiming education for all of us, with its final words. Oh, wait a minute. You don't even know what I just read is the last paragraph of the author's conclusion. How could you, when you haven't read the book? Oh, yeah, that's my assignment. So maybe you're asking yourself, now that I know what she read is the last paragraph of the author's conclusion, why did Latanya do that? Well, I have a perfectly good answer for you. It's my presentation and I can do whatever I want. No, seriously. After reading the book and thinking about how I want to present it to you all, I thought it was appropriate because to answer the question Mike Rose poses in his title, it is necessary to consider the destination towards which we head. It is especially appropriate for this book because this final observation explains concisely the concerns Rose attempts to address in Why School, Reclaiming Education for All of Us. They are what is in the curriculum and why, how we teach, how we frame what intelligence is, what we value in school and society, issues of opportunity for all, including appropriate remediation, issues of common obligation that should be part of our culture as a democratic society. Now that I've gotten that out the way, let me back up and tell you about Mike Rose. Actually, Dr. Mike Rose. But you'd never know that by looking at the front cover of Why School. In fact, as I looked at the front covers of all the books he's written, which are Lives on the Boundary, Possible Lives, The Mind at Work, and Back to School, that seemed to be standard. I find that interesting in this day and age of the ivory tower syndrome. With that said, who is Mike Rose? Well, Mike Rose is currently a professor of social research methodology in the UCLA Graduate School of Education and Information Studies. He is the son of working-class Italian immigrants. In interviews that I've watched and articles that I've read, Rose talked about his education growing up. He mentioned that he drifted uneventfully through most of his early education. Through a mix-up in test scores with another student with the same surname, Rose was placed in a vocational education track upon entering high school. After several years, a teacher looked at Rose's record and discovered that Rose had been misplaced in the vocational track. Rose was moved out of the vocational education track and began the following school year in the college prep track. Once in the college prep track, a dedicated English teacher his senior year soon pushed Rose to reevaluate himself and helped him get admitted as a probationary student to Loyola University. This change in perspective proved to be a turning point for Rose, who would then go on to earn his bachelor's degree from Loyola and win a graduate fellowship in English to UCLA. I pause here because his story is not uncommon. Sad to say, it's not uncommon to the stories that we hear about students, our students, and we may have even experienced it with our students as well. I also pause because if you have the chance to just look at his other books, you'll see a theme or a pattern which I think comes from his experiences, his upbringing, and as a matter of fact, from all that I've read about him, a lot of the works that he's done, he's actually used his own experiences as examples in those books. I won't tell you what I think the theme is in hopes that you'll try to figure it out for yourself. I mentioned that Rose won a graduate fellowship to UCLA. However, he became disaffected with academia and left graduate study to embark on a series of jobs teaching writing to underprivileged and underprepared students in inner city LA. Over the next several years, Rose would teach everything from elementary writing to basic adult literacy. In time, Rose accepted a position as director at UCLA's Tutoring Center, where he was instrumental in shaping tutoring, training, and policy. In 81, Rose received his PhD in education from UCLA, and in 94 was hired as a faculty member. So as you can see, he doesn't just talk, he's walked the walk as well. Y School is comprised of many short chapters, each tackling an issue related to American education. It covers some great topics, which you see now, and they are what I call Rose's dozen. You know, like Baker's dozen? Okay, I digress. All the topics he covers are quite relevant to the current educational landscape, but I must admit that the chapters are so short that Rose isn't able to go into very much detail. Many of the chapters feel like introductions to much longer essays. By the way, the book is comprised of a number of essays that Rose developed from opinion pieces, commentaries, and blog entries. Okay, going back to my initial train of thought. Before you can get to the substance of the issue, the chapter ends, and you're confronted with the next topic. This is actually Rose's second printing of Y School. It was originally published in 2009, but this year a second printing of the book came out. Given all that I've shared about Rose, you shouldn't be surprised that he decided to add additional thoughts to the book. His additional words are in what he calls his afterword. He gives advice on writing about school as only a writer would do. As you look at the 11 topics, tell me which one you think Dr. Gruner wouldn't like. Out of his 11 nuggets of advice, I really like testing the idea with the community in your head. His advice: imagine different people you respect hearing or reading what you wrote. He does note that he's not talking about all those nattering voices in your head that tell you that your writing just stinks. Instead, he's referring to those who you believe have a smart and distinct point of view. For me, it's my maternal grandmother. She never graduated from high school. In fact, she only went as far as the 8th grade, and yet she is, or was, one of the smartest women I know. He advised to ask what that person would say and how you can incorporate that into your writing. Now, going back to Rose's dozen, Rose reminds us through these dozen what it feels like to be moved by educators, because the book itself is a lesson in education. Like an inspiring teacher, Rose says what many of us in education feel to be true and forces us to examine our own values. As I previously mentioned, this book is a collection of essays. Each one is a very deliberate step through a process of critical thinking about why it is we go to school, return to school, and, as a nation and as individuals, value school. Rose begins the book by placing school in a personal light, using the first essay, In Search of a Fresh Language of Schooling, to reflect on the language we use when discussing education and the impact that educational experiences have on life outcomes. For example, Rose talks about how education has been shaped by economic readiness and competitiveness. Sure, he says, economic motives have always been a significant factor in the spread of mass education in the U.S., but what he wants us to consider is how this economic focus, blended with the technology of large-scale assessment, can restrict our sense of what school ought to be about, which is the full sweep of growth and development for both individuals and for a pluralistic democracy. In the second chapter, Finding Our Way, The Experience of Education, Rose broadens this topic to national consciousness, showing how American approaches to education can both broaden our horizons and impede our democratic process. Through the middle of the book, Rose looks at how our national expectations are projected onto our students and define the way they learn to value intelligence, people, and standards of living. Rose then talks about the state of remediation for struggling students and others trying to enter the educational system. Though I just gave you a brief overview of the book, I'd like to share with you 3 chapters that struck a chord with me. They are No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, and the Spirit of Democratic Education. While acknowledging accountability is a necessary goal, Rose, like many others, decries the ways in which the implementation of NCLB seems to have put a stranglehold on our curriculum, turning it from exploration and excitement into one of deadly dull test preparation. Although he did not provide a suggested alternative, his intention seems to be to open and encourage dialogue rather than suggest summary alternatives. The second one is Intelligence in the Workplace and the Schoolhouse. Rose addresses how Americans view intelligence in a binary way, in which some work requires intelligence while other types of common or blue-collar work, like hairdressing and waiting tables, does not. In fact, Rose purports the idea that brain work and hand work are separate things is counterintuitive. He provides compelling examples of how, even though we have begun through the work of scholars like Howard Gardner and Robert Sternberg, who have helped us broaden our understanding of intelligence with concepts such as multiple intelligences and practical intelligence, we tend to undervalue or miss entirely the many displays of what the mind does every day, all the time, right under our noses. The third one is Reflections on Standards, Teaching, and Learning. According to Rose, standards that are applied fairly facilitate learning and show students that their teachers believe in their ability to meet academic expectations. Standards for the student performance must be explained to the student and consistent across levels, he states. In developing them, we need to think about the broader questions of the purpose of teaching a particular subject and the histories of the students in our class. Often, however, standards are rigidly enforced. Of course, this chapter made me think about what we are dealing with in the state of Indiana with our Common Core Indiana Academic Standards. It is my hope that next week the standards will actually be approved by the board, but given the state of flux that our educational system has been in, I would not be surprised at all if we go back to the drawing board. However, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, as I'm sure that many of you are, because the uncertainty and the not knowing of what we are going to be teaching, when we're going to be teaching it, has to be troubling for many of us, especially at this late date, because the ability to get a handle on the new standards and be versed in those standards as we go into the next school year is crucial at this point. Overall, while depicting the current state of public education as one of lost hope, Rose seems to believe that as an institution, it has the potential to be the place where opportunities are available for all children. He also suggests that public education could and should contribute to the common good in ways originally intended by Thomas Jefferson, by creating an informed citizenry capable of public dialogue. The ideas Why School Raises, by Rose's own admission, deserves public attention and debate. I agree with nearly everything he has to say about the need to examine what we feel the purpose of schools should be, What definitions of intelligence will we embrace? How will we reform schools from a holistic, class conscious point of view, not addressed in the narrow language of accountability and testing? I would recommend this book. It's a pretty quick read. It's a little over 200 pages, and I actually liked his style of writing. I would say it's deceptively simple and extremely honest.